Hello and welcome to a special episode of To The Point. With less than 72 hours to go for the talks between the National Security Advisors of India and Pakistan on Sunday, two key questions come to everyone's mind. Is this the right environment for such talks? And is the Indian government in danger of contradicting and perhaps even compromising its policies and priorities and principles by going ahead? Those are the issues I shall raise today in an exclusive interview with the former Foreign and Finance Minister of India, Yashwant Sinha. Mr. Sinha, should the National Security Advisors of India and Pakistan be meeting at a time when every single day there are serious violations of the ceasefire along the line of control and the international border, and when India is still smarting from the terrorist incidents recently in Gurdaspur and Udhampur? Many people feel this is the wrong time for such talks. Where do you stand on that issue?
Well, I stand very firmly with the no-sayers. I don't think this is the right time for such talks to take place. Terrorism is an issue which has been a long-term issue between India and Pakistan. But if you look at the recent events, you will find that the firing on the international border and the line of control is completely contrary to the agreement which was reached in 2003, after which we had peace along the international border, on the line of control, and what we described as AGPL, the actual ground position line in Siachen. Now that stands completely shattered. Too much is happening. The border and the LOC is volatile. And there has been a spurt, a tremendous increase in the number of terrorist incidents of late. So these two factors do not constitute the right background for talks to take place. And additionally, we have a series of provocations from the Pakistani side, to which I'm sure we'll come during the course of our conversation this evening.
I'll come to those in a moment's time. But I want to recall the fact that about a year ago, last year in July, August, Foreign Secretary level talks were abruptly cancelled because the Pakistan High Commissioner spoke to Hurriyat, something which incidentally Pakistan has been doing since 1995. 12 months later this year, you've already had 7 Indians killed and maybe 11 or 12 seriously injured as a result of firing from the Pakistani side, and yet the government is determined to go ahead with talks. And many people say this points towards an inconsistency, perhaps even a sort of flip-flop in Indian foreign policy.
Whichever government may have been in power, a certain amount of flip-flop has been evident. And this, I think this flows from the conviction that I am different and I can achieve something which my predecessors have failed to achieve.
That's a sort of delusion this government is suffering from.
I mean, I can't think of anything else. Considering that talks are taking place at this point of time.
The government has actually convinced itself that it's different to other governments, therefore it can get better results, therefore it can take risks which others didn't.
I had, Karan, written an article in January 2013, 2.5 years from now, in which the last line that I had mentioned was, after dealing with India-Pakistan relationship, that successive prime ministers of India should perish the thought that they can achieve peace with Pakistan and this will be a road to Nobel Peace Prize.
Unfortunately, it sounds and seems as if that advice this government hasn't taken.
No, none of the governments in the past or present seem to have taken that advice.
Something else has also happened. Yesterday it emerged that the Pakistan High Commissioner has invited top leaders of Hurriyat to meet with Mr. Sartaj Aziz in Delhi. Now, as you know, we abruptly called off Foreign Secretary level talks because their High Commissioner had met with Hurriyat. Many people now believe that this invitation to Hurriyat to meet Sartaj Aziz is actually not just defiance, it's a sort of slap in India's face from Pakistan.
You have mentioned, I had mentioned to you earlier that Pakistan is indulging in provocations of various kinds. Look at the speech which their High Commissioner made in Delhi on the 14th of August, their Independence Day, and emphasized once again the centrality of the Jammu and Kashmir issue. He was summoned to the Foreign Office in Delhi about the border ceasefire violations. And what did he say when he came out? That he in turn had protested to India about 70 violations of the ceasefire that we allegedly committed. Read his interview in the Hindustan Times today. And finally, the invitation to Hurriyat to come here is defiance all along. And I have said it earlier also that this calls for not only calling off the dialogue or the talks that we are planning, even at this late stage, just because Sartaj Aziz has not boarded the flight to Delhi yet. But we should take serious note of the activities and actions of the Pakistani High Commissioner in Delhi, declare him persona non grata and send him back to Pakistan.
Absolutely none of that has happened. Instead, there is total silence from the government, and sources, often said to be at the very highest level, are saying the government is determined to go ahead.
I have seen such reports, and I would expect that even at a very late stage, the government will reconsider its decision.
You're still hoping that even now the government will call off the talks?
I am hoping that they will call off the talks in view of the provocations that Pakistan has provided.
In fact, you went one step further. You said they should declare the Pakistan High Commissioner for his series of provocations persona non grata and send him home.
Yes, yes. I am absolutely convinced such a person is not behaving diplomatically. He is behaving politically. And that's not part of his remit.
And if the Indian government doesn't do what you're hoping, A, call off the talks at this stage, and B, send the High Commissioner back home, what will that be proof of in your eyes?
No, perhaps, I am not part of the government. I am not privy to all the information that they have. But, we'll await, I will personally await if the talks are held, the outcome of the talks and see what happens.
But then it will be, in your eyes, a weakness on India's part going into talks, not strength, not principle.
Pakistan has misused every such opportunity. And the United Nations General Assembly session is coming.
Maliha Lodi, the ambassador, has already raised it there as well.
Already raised it. Now I'll keep my fingers crossed about what happens in the UNGA.
Meanwhile, the only step the Indian government seems to have taken today with regard to the invitation from the Pakistan High Commissioner to Hurriyat to meet Sartaj Aziz is to first put them under house arrest in the morning and then mysteriously release them 2 or 2.5 hours later. What do you make of that sort of flip-flop?
Let's look at the next step of the government of India.
You mean it could be even more perplexing and confusing?
Let's see.
So we're getting to a stage where you're actually bemused, befuddled, perplexed, but also deeply disconcerted and worried by the way the Indian government is handling and responding to things.
They must be having some reason for doing what they are doing. I am not privy to that.
But it's not apparent to anyone.
But I would like to make this point to you very firmly that this is a complete departure from the line that Mr. Vajpayee had adopted. There is a complete departure from the line that the BJP had until last year.
I was going to ask you that specifically. You were in power from 98 to 2004. Would Mr. Vajpayee, you as Foreign Minister, Yashwant Sinha, your predecessor as Foreign Minister, have ever contemplated the possibility of talks and terror happening simultaneously, which seems to be the case now?
Though the Vajpayee line, which was captured very clearly in the January 6, 2004 joint press statement which was issued in Islamabad, which I had presented to the world media on the same day, there very clearly, and it's a personal contribution of Mr. Vajpayee, that terror and talks will not go together. We agreed to resume the composite dialogue process with Pakistan only after there was a solemn assurance forthcoming from President Musharraf that he will not allow territory or territory under Pakistan's control to be misused for violence, hatred or terror against India.
And now today, when this government is prepared to go ahead with talks while terror is happening, they are going back themselves on what Mr. Vajpayee had achieved.
Before this government went back on this, the UPA government consigned this very important document in our relationship to the dustbin, because there was no reference, this was not followed up, and we seem to have conceded to Pakistan whatever they wanted in talk after talk after talk.
And now Mr. Modi is following the UPA pattern rather than standing by what Mr. Vajpayee achieved.
This is certainly not the BJP pattern.
So you're a disillusioned man today, you're a disheartened man
Well,
today.
I am not yet fully disheartened. I'll wait for the outcome of the talks.
But you're still, and before that you're hoping the High Commissioner will be sent home and the talks will be called off. Let me at this point put to you, in all fairness, the arguments the government has, because I think it's important you should be given a chance to answer them. First of all, the government says, and this is said through sources, that the cross-border firing that's been happening incessantly since September, and even this invitation to meet with Hurriyat and Mr. Aziz Khan is deliberately designed by anti-India elements in Pakistan in the belief that this will force India to call off the talks. The government doesn't want to play into their hands. Therefore, it's showing restraint and it's letting the talks go on.
I'm very happy, Karan, that you have asked me this question. Because the Pakistani line all along has been, whenever they are cornered, they'll say, we are not responsible. Non-state actors have done this. Now, and followed by saying that we have no control over the non-state actors. In this particular case, the firing is being done by Pakistani armed forces along the border and the LOC, right? This is not the handiwork of non-state actors. Then the provocation by inviting the Hurriyat has come from their High Commissioner in Delhi. He is not a non-state actor. In this particular case, Pakistan does not have the comfort of this alibi that they have no control over non-state actors and this is being done by non-state actors. Pakistani officials and Pakistani forces are doing what they're doing, and unless the entire Indian media is wrong and the government of India is wrong, you know, they are doing something which is absolutely scandalous.
But you're saying something more important. Not only does Pakistan no longer have the comfort of the old alibi that non-state actors are involved, the Indian government therefore doesn't have any strength in its explanation that this is anti-India forces trying to stop
which anti-India? You know, let's look at it. We are aware of the fact that as far as the Pakistan polity is concerned, we have the elected government of Nawaz Sharif. Then we have the Pakistani army, which is the superior power center in Pakistan, and we have the non-state actors. In this particular case, when you were saying that anti-India elements are doing this, which are the anti-India elements? Is it the Pakistani army? Is it the ISI? Is it the Pakistani elected government itself?
So this
is an argument which is not available to Pakistan.
And more importantly,
and neither to us for that matter.
And more importantly, this is a logic put forward by the Indian government for continuing with talks which doesn't wash and work with you at all.
No, it doesn't.
The second argument being put forward by the Indian government for continuing with the talks is the argument that because terror is happening, because there is cross-border violence and firing on the LOC or the international border, because there is political tension, talks are necessary. The government says, after all, one makes peace with one's enemies and opponents, not with one's friends. Does that work with you?
The circumstances in which peace talks are held would determine the outcome of the peace talks. And I don't think, as we discussed right in the beginning, that the circumstances and the indications are such that we'll have any fruitful outcome of these talks.
So this argument doesn't work with you either?
This argument doesn't work with me.
There's a third argument the government puts forward. It says that Pakistan's intention is to force India to call off the talks so that Pakistan can then go to the rest of the world and say, you see, India was the recalcitrant partner, India was the hard partner, we wanted talks, India didn't. And the government is saying through sources they don't want to fall into that trap, hence they're continuing with talks.
Last year we had cancelled the talks at the last moment, at the foreign secretary level. 12 months have passed. Are we any worse for it? You know, this is where diplomacy comes into play. I mean, we have missions all over the world. Let us explain to the governments where our missions are and to everyone else who is interested the circumstances under which we were compelled to do what we should do, namely call off the talks.
So when we put forward these three explanations for continuing with talks at a time when you're absolutely certain the talks shouldn't happen, you're also suggesting this is a weakness or lack of confidence in ourselves?
No, I don't know. I don't know, Karan, whether it's weakness or lack of confidence. I don't want to get into an argument with the government, but I would certainly like to make the point that neither now nor in future ever we should demonstrate any weakness in dealing with Pakistan.
And at the moment you get the feeling we probably are suggesting weakness.
I mean, if we, in the face of all the provocations which they are throwing at us, we do continue, then it will clearly show that there is some compulsion.
Which is like weakness.
Could be.
Before I talk to you about the actual talks more directly, because I want to come to that in a moment's time, I want to ask you a wider question about India's Pakistan policy and the way it's evolved since May 2014. It began with an invitation to Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif to come for Mr. Modi's swearing in Delhi, and the very warm, prolonged exchange of gifts and letters between them. Then there was an abrupt U-turn when the Foreign Secretary level talks were cancelled at the last moment because the Pakistan High Commissioner had met Hurriyat. Then there was another U-turn at Ufa when suddenly the two countries met, they issued a joint statement, followed by this determination to continue with talks almost no matter what the cost. And people ask, does all of this add up to a consistent policy against Pakistan? Or is this a sign of lack of clarity and lack of focus? Which is
No, at some point of time, it appears to me that the government of India decided that we should have a dialogue with Pakistan. And there was one link which you missed, namely the visit of our Foreign Secretary to Islamabad, which may have been a preparatory visit for the kind of statement that we saw from UFA. And I would personally think that the UFA statement, joint statement, was a very good statement from the point of view of India. Because if you look at it, there is a structure in that statement about the dialogue will be confined to security and terrorism issues. But immediately after that, as usual, Pakistan has gone back, and repeatedly the indication that they are giving is, the statements they are making are that Kashmir will be the core issue and there can't be any discussion without Kashmir. Now when you sit across the table and start discussing, they'll have a script, we'll have a script. You can't say, I don't agree with your script, and we are walking out. So that brings us very importantly to the detailed agenda of these talks, if at all they should take place.
I'll come to that in a moment's time. But answer this for me. As you look at India's Pakistan policy from May 2014 till today, do you see consistency or do you see zigzag, lack of clarity, sometimes lack of focus?
Well, there has been certainly, I mean, you can see the zigzags, there is no doubt about it. But is it deliberate? Is it lack of focus as you are putting it, or it's a focused zigzag because we have a certain end in mind? I don't know what that end is. Maybe the people sitting in government have. They have a certain goal which they would like to achieve through these talks. So that's why we have to, if the talks take place at all, we'll have to await the outcome.
There is a wide impression in India that our Pakistan policy is decided and controlled by the PMO and the NSA, not really by the Foreign Minister and the Foreign Office. So if there is lack of clarity, lack of focus, or what you call a focus zigzag, or a certain amount of uncertainty and confusion, would I be right in believing that therefore the responsibility vests with the PMO?
You know, in this particular case, the dialogue is at the level of the NSA, deliberately kept at that level. There is no foreign minister in Pakistan, so our foreign minister could not have been talking to her counterpart. So in this particular case, looking at the UFA declaration or joint statement and the talks which are going to follow, it is clearly
the NSA
being controlled by the NSA, and he is the one who is coordinating everything.
So any lack of focus, lack of clarity, the responsibility is the NSA's quite
The
obviously.
responsibility, Karan, will be of the whole government. I mean, there is a cabinet committee on security, and I am sure the cabinet committee on security would have met or will meet before the talks actually take place. And it's the collective responsibility of the government.
So the government as a whole is responsible. You can't pin the blame on any one person.
Yeah. Any one person or any one department.
This is the government's responsibility. It's too big to be pinned on anyone else.
Yes.
But that's a very important thing you're saying. The government as a whole is responsible for whatever happens hereafter. Whether it goes well or whether it goes badly, this is governmental responsibility.
The credit will be government's, the discredit will also be government's.
Let's then come and talk directly about the talks that are going to be taking place, presumably in less than 72 hours on Sunday. Now, the subject is supposed to be just terror. But does this not give Pakistan an equal opportunity to raise its allegations about India's involvement in Balochistan, Karachi, Fatah, and perhaps even their claim that there was an Indian hand in the December bomb that killed 150 children in Peshawar? And if Pakistan raises this, then will the talks go our way, or will it be a little tu me all over again?
This is my worst fear. From all the indications which are appearing in the media, it appears that Pakistan is coming prepared with its case. It is coming prepared to raise all these issues that you have mentioned, particularly Balochistan, which we had conceded in Sharm el-Sheikh. And the likelihood is that we will put forth our case, we'll put forth our arguments, and as I have said earlier, for every argument that we'll put forth, there will be a counter argument from Pakistan. For every dossier that we shall produce, there will be a counter dossier from Pakistan. And at the end of it, the whole thing will be not merely tu me. At the end of it, it will be a completely confused picture which will emerge. Pakistan will tell the world and the world media what they think about the whole thing. We'll go and do a similar exercise, and it will be as clear as mud.
So the two will be grandstanding to their domestic audiences, proving that they were great Bahadurs in front of the other. Nothing will have been achieved.
Pakistan has always done that. In fact, India has been restrained on occasions, but Pakistan has always done that. And they, these talks provide them with an opportunity to do that grandstanding.
And that's another reason why these talks shouldn't be happening, because we're giving them the platform and opportunity to grandstand at our cost.
At our cost.
India, of course, has made it clear that it's going to raise the 2611 trial in Pakistan that's going nowhere, as well as Zakir Rahman Lakvi, who's been given bail in a big way. But Pakistan's already clarified that they're going to respond by raising Samjhauta, which they claim is a year older, by raising Swami Asimanand, who's been given bail, which the Indian government hasn't contested. So once again, you get the feeling it's going to be nothing but a trading of accusations, with both people playing to their domestic audience, nothing being achieved.
That's exactly what I said. Argument, counter-argument, dossier, counter-dossier.
Pakistan also, as their High Commissioner has indicated in an interview to the Hindustan Times this morning, has said they will definitely bringing up Kashmir. In fact, if I recall his words correctly, he suggested that Kashmir is more important to Pakistan than terror. Now, we believe these talks are only about terror. Kashmir ought not to feature. So when Pakistan brings up Kashmir, as the High Commissioner says they will, do we have a fairly sizable problem on our hands?
No, we should then, going by the joint statement of UFA, we should clearly rule out any other issue. If the talks take place, we should clearly rule out a raising of any other issue by Pakistan except a discussion on terror. You can't say don't talk about terror which is taking place. That we'll have to concede to them, because terror, they claim, is from our side taking place in Pakistan. However ridiculous that might be, the point is that issue they can raise, but that should not lead to the K word. K word should not be allowed to be uttered during the talks.
Well, if and when, and I'm deliberately saying when, not if, Mr. Aziz brings up Kashmir, because he said he's going to do it and his High Commissioner said he's going to do it, what do? Do we walk out?
We show the UFA joint statement to him and say the NSA level talks are only about terror.
But if he then persists, do we walk out?
No, we can't walk out in Delhi. If we
so
had
then
that
we're
option.
Stuck. Then we're stuck.
No, we should firmly say we will not allow Kashmir issue to be raised in any way.
So this could be a major
even if it leads
problem.
To a
this could be a major problem.
Could be. At a much higher level, when the President of Pakistan and the Prime Minister of India were meeting in Agra, the talks did not lead to anything, not even a statement.
Be prepared for that here too.
Absolutely. And when you are dealing with India, Pakistan, you have to be prepared for such an outcome.
So in fact, what you're saying to me, and I'll ask you now up front, is that you don't believe there will be anything productive or effective that will emerge from these talks. In fact, there's a danger the tension and the discord between the two countries could be worse at the end.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if these talks are meant to carry the peace process forward, they could prove to be completely contrary to that objective.
In which case, if there was a compulsion of some sort, the talks must happen. Do you think at this point of time, given the background, the talk should have been between the DGMOs, which was envisaged in UFA, or perhaps the Director Generals of the BSF and the Pakistan Rangers, which was also envisaged in UFA, rather than at the NSA level?
No, but at UFA, in the joint statement in UFA, we agreed, number one, that it will be a talk between the two NSAs, and that's a talk which is likely to take place. The other two will follow in that sequence.
So these talks with NSA should have just been postponed for longer rather than held now?
Could have been. I mean, we did not agree to dates.
Omar Abdullah has put out a tweet today to suggest that both sides are talking to each other, as they will presumably on Sunday, under international pressure. Otherwise, he says, these talks at this point of time make no sense. Do you think there could be some pressure that's pushing us together?
You know, there are some do-gooders in the international community which are always putting pressure for their own selfish interests on both countries. I will not rule it out, I will not confirm it.
Now, there are many sources in government who are suggesting, perhaps even hoping, that these talks on Sunday will lead to the two prime ministers meeting at the UN in September. Secondly, some people are suggesting or hoping that these talks on Sunday could lead to a more broader range of dialogue between the two countries, whether you call it the composite dialogue or something else. How would you view both of those prospects?
I'll keep my fingers crossed. I'll keep my counsel for the time being. We'll await the outcome of these talks.
When you say you'll keep your fingers crossed, are you keeping your fingers crossed against the two prime ministers taking the risk of going for another meeting?
Against any next step.
Against any next step.
Yes.
So you're basically saying to me that we don't have a chance now of avoiding this unless they call it off at the last moment. But after that, please don't jump to talk at UN, don't jump to expand the talks into a composite dialogue.
No, we must see what we have achieved in these talks. And in terms of UFA, there must be then DGMOs and BSF talks. You know, and then after these three steps, as envisaged in UFA, are completed, can we think in terms of the next step?
So we need a very substantial period of contemplation, reflection and thinking after this before we decide about the future.
And we need a very substantial amount of coverage of the issues before we think of the next step.
In other words, when you say coverage of the issues, you need the government to explain to us what they've achieved, where they've got to the extent they can.
On terror.
On terror in particular.
Yes, yes. And that is where, you know, the January 6th statement, which was personally seen and approved and amended by Mr. Vajpayee, that assumes importance.
And what you're therefore saying is that the sort of cryptic silence that we've had in the run-up to the talks will not be acceptable after the talks. The government must at least explain what they've achieved, where they've got, so that the country knows.
The government, on behalf of the government, as you have said, all these 3 points that you mentioned, you have picked up
from sources.
Somewhere. Yeah, from sources. And the media is full of such stories from sources. So obviously the government is telling the media what it plans to do, just as Pakistan is doing. And therefore, after the talks are over, if at all they are held, they are duty bound to tell the people of this country what has been the outcome.
Preferably openly through some official person talking, or through sources?
No. Openly. I mean, openly, either the NSA or somebody addresses a press conference and tells the people of India and the rest of the world what we have achieved or not achieved.
Let's take a break at that point, Mr. Sinha. When I come back, I want to move from talking about the NSA talks and ask you a few questions specifically about how you view Pakistan today. In the situation that prevails in that country today, do you believe that Nawaz Sharif is master of Pakistan's India policy, or are we in danger of talking to the wrong Sharif in Pakistan?
you know, if you look at the 68-year-old history of Pakistan, even during periods when a so-called elected government has been in power in Pakistan, the shots have been called clearly by the army, especially when it comes to dealing with India. So I'll be, or you will be, anyone else will be extremely, what shall I say, naive to think that in the case of Mr. Nawaz Sharif, it is any different. And Nawaz Sharif has been weakened. You remember that Imran Khan episode and all that. He has been considerably weakened, and he has to go back to the army and take instructions from them.
In which case, should India find a way of establishing contact with the Pakistani military establishment? Should we find a way of trying to talk directly with the army chief?
I am not in favor of that. I am not at all in favor of that. I would rather wait for a day when there will be a normal polity and the kind of democracy we are used to in Pakistan. Until then, it is anybody's guess what is going to come out of our relationship with Pakistan. But I'll tell you one thing, Karan. In that article which I wrote in January 2013, I clearly said that while we should not talk to Pakistan, we should take all the steps which are necessary to ensure that we are not subjected to kind of terrorism to which we have been subjected to in the past. Why are the terrorists in a way roaming free? They can attack Udhampur, they can attack Gurdaspur, they can do what they like.
Have we dropped our guard?
No, we somewhere our preparations are not as adequate as they should be. And we should spend whatever amount of money is needed to ensure that we completely protect ourselves from all such attacks.
In fact, one of the things that emerged when Muhammad Naveed alias Usman was first captured is that he alleged that he and 3 of others had crossed into India perhaps 42, 45 days earlier. Then they'd gone back at some point, then they'd come in again, and it seems that in fact this crossing point on the border is a bit like a chutney or a sieve. You can enter and leave as you want.
Despite all the precautions which have been taken over the years, the border and the line of control, unfortunately, still remains porous.
And this should be our first priority.
This should be plugged. Then we must improve our intelligence. We should become impregnable. I mean, can you imagine something like this happening in the US? That you cross and come back and cross and come back?
Do you see any signs of what you're suggesting being done by this government?
Well, there is a continuing exercise of strengthening the border and the line of control. The border is generally strengthened. It's along the line of control that such incidents take place.
Meanwhile, as someone who's been observing Pakistan, studying Pakistan very closely, both as foreign minister and thereafter, what message is being sent to us, A, by the spate of terror attacks in Gurdaspur and Udhampur, and B, by the prolonged heavy cross-border firing on the LOC as well as the international border, which effectively has continued since September last year? What message are we getting?
If you want my very frank answer to the message, the message is from Pakistani army. They are telling us, you talk to whosoever you like from the government in Pakistan, nothing is going to come out. We'll do exactly what we feel like doing. This is the message.
Are we in danger in India of turning ourselves deliberately deaf to that message?
I don't know. I'm sure the government is aware of this situation.
But that's what you fear.
I'm afraid it's when you talked about the anti-India elements in Pakistan, it's clearly the Pakistani army and the ISI.
And so we should be aware of this and
we should be aware, absolutely aware.
Rather than turn a deaf ear.
Yeah.
One of the things that analysts have begun to say about Pakistan is that in geopolitical, geostrategic terms, the country's position is significantly improved in the last 1 year. First, China has pledged $46 billion worth of investment. Secondly, Pakistan's relationship with Washington has improved, whilst Washington's dependence on Pakistan as it retreats from Afghanistan has also increased. Thirdly, Russia is now prepared to supply arms to Pakistan, which it hasn't done for a very, very long time. And finally, the American-Iranian nuclear deal has meant that there's been a substantial warming up in relationships between Islamabad and Riyadh. Do you believe that as we plot the future of our Pakistan policy, we need to take this changing geostrategic condition into mind?
No, we have to. We have to take all these developments into account. And it was perhaps that which persuaded our Prime Minister to go to UAE and issue the kind of a statement which was issued. I would personally think that was a very good thing that has happened, and we should reach out to more and more so-called friends of Pakistan to tell them what exactly Pakistan is up to.
So therefore,
and we should prevent at all cost, Karan, any primacy to Pakistan in Afghanistan.
so one of the elements of our foreign policy should be to try and find effective strategic ways of countering any increase in influence that Pakistan may hope to achieve.
Yes.
We should be there and ready
Yes.
to check it and to put our side out first. This has to be almost a key focus of our foreign policy.
It has to be, and I'm sure it is.
One last question. Do you think in these changed, volatile circumstances of the relationship between Delhi and Islamabad, there should be room for a back channel? A back channel existed when you were in office. It was first Tariq Aziz and R.K. Mishra, then more importantly Tariq Aziz and Brajesh Mishra. It existed right through the UP years, Tariq Aziz and Sati Lamba. Mr. Modi has consciously not gone in for a back channel, but do you think that's something he should consider?
In a situation like this, a back channel could be useful. A real back channel which does not attract attention, because you can discuss and sort out many issues through the back channel, and when you actually deal front channel, you can take advantage of the understanding which has been reached through the back channel.
So if you want to try and make advances even when you've got an adverse atmosphere and environment, the back channel is the way to proceed without embarrassing yourself on the front channel.
I mean, even as far as the back channel is concerned, you have to be very sure about the timing. I would say a back channel is always a better alternative in a case like Pakistan's than plunging into open dialogue like the one which is going to take place.
Yashwant Sinha, a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.